Good morning and welcome to the Mount Gretna School of Arts Summer Lecture Series. And I think this is the last lecture of the summer, so I might thank a few more of our seasoned sponsors here. The Mount Gretna Arts Council, the Thomas A. and Georgina T. Rousseau Family Foundation, the Rodney G. DeHaven Fund, and the Rosemary Beck Foundation. I also want to thank specifically the big sponsors of this lecture series this summer. The Arts for All Partnership with the Foundation for Enhancing Communities and Stinson Strout. And I'm going to throw Rachel Dorsey into this, who brought some of her Chicago Art Institute skills to these lectures and has been helping me set things up every day. She's taking a break from her job to be one of our students here this summer. So thank you. Going to introduce Michael McCaffrey, who's been a lot of fun here the past week or so as our lead painting instructor. He came down from Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, where he lives. But he right now teaches just about every class, it appears, at the University of Kansas. I saw the list of things he did there. It's pretty incredible. He got his MFA from IU Bloomington and his BFA from the University of Kansas. He's in a group show right now at Manifest Gallery in Cincinnati. And he has coming up a fellowship at the Ballinglen Presidency in Ireland. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I am Michael McCaffrey, and thank you, Jay and Heidi and Henry, for having me here and allowing me to live with you for the last 2 weeks. And thank you to Mount Gretna for being such a wonderful host, and all the wonderful students that I've got to interact with as well. So the title of my lecture is Incessantly Seeking Subject, or some of the stuff I've made things out of in a brief narrative of how I got here. Because I don't normally title lectures, but like it was mentioned the other night, Jay was like, "What's the title of your lecture?" And it's like, okay, here's something. And I was like, I really struggle with these things. Like, it's like nerve-wracking to stand up here and talk about work, or to just stand in front of people and talk in general. And one of the other things I was trying to figure out is like why it is so difficult to especially give one of these talks. And it's, I think, because I try to create like a narrative structure that's linear, when so much of the way that my work has developed has not been that way. So I thought, and I was like, I didn't know like really how to talk about that. So I made a little drawing yesterday in my studio, like a little diagram of like at the top, you can see like as it's presented, with like to now. And then this is more what it actually feels like. It's like somewhere started over here and then so this is actually like, what you're seeing today is like kind of a curated selection of things that I hope illustrate kind of the development that my work has had over the last, 20 years. So anyway, the subject matter in my work, there's lots of things to paint. Cats, for instance, these are two of my cats. That's Mr. Grumbles. One of his long poses on the rug in the living room. Carl Laron, he's a French interior cat designer. He does wonderful things with the rugs in the house. This is one of his poses where he's illustrating that he does not have interior structural anatomy. And so I will make little paintings of these guys on a regular basis. Mr. Grumbles on the left, and then Carl Laron on the left. Small 5x7 paintings. One could also make paintings of chickens. This is Demelza, one of the hens that lives in my backyard, and it was suggested last night that she might actually be in my beard the last 2 weeks. But she's not. She's at home, and my 82-year-old father is looking after her, looking after them all, supposedly. So here he is during a obviously critical visit to my studio, just kind of recently. And so before I go forward talking about things, I'm going to go back and start like way back, I guess, kind of at the beginning. And my primary influences when I was younger weren't like artists, like they weren't books. There were not any trips to art museums or things like that. Like I wasn't raised in a family of artists. My mom was an administrative assistant at a radio station, which was cool because I got lots of free CDs, and my dad was a cop. And I was really into comic books, specifically Batman. So I would buy these comic books, make these little drawings. And this is, I guess, like a joint drawing with my father because I made it. And then he decided it looked like him. And so he said, Dad. Thanks, Dad. When I didn't really take a lot of art classes in high school. When I went, I did go to a junior college before I moved on to the University of Kansas, and I had an art history class there. I think I was more interested in film and writing, and so this was a requirement that went with that associate's degree, which I never got. But the art history, suddenly that was like really, really interesting to me. And I saw paintings by Soutine and Van Gogh that really, really resonated with me on a level that I didn't totally understand. So I went to like a craft store and I bought paint, oil paint, and I took it home and I just started kind of making paintings. And this is one of the first paintings that I made. Which is from a photograph of my father. So almost like immediately when I got the paint out and started putting it on the canvas, I had never felt anything like that. The tactility and the sensation of the material was like I was just immediately in love with the way that it moved. So then I didn't really take any art classes. I took maybe a drawing class at the junior college. And then I transferred over to the university. I was playing around with a couple different like majors that I was going to pursue. One was like classics, one was philosophy, one was painting. And when I was talking to the advisor about which degree to choose, she was like, you don't have to take a speech class if you take the fine arts route. And I said, let's do that one because I'm terrified of public speaking. And that really backfired for me. So, but when I did come to undergrad, I had some really great teachers that just immediately saw like how much I love the material of the paint. And they showed me Giacometti, here, Portrait of His Mother, and then Lucian Freud, both of whom became like my teachers, even though they weren't there. And I just kind of devoured their work. They gave me permission to make some paintings that I wanted to in the way that I wanted to, which basically involved painting people near me, friends and family, coming to my studio, sitting and kind of working from observation. I applied for graduate school, not with these paintings because they're not mine, but I applied for graduate school in my senior year and I didn't get in anywhere. And this really irritated me because I really wanted to keep painting and I wanted to continue that conversation. And really I was looking for a community of other painters. So I kind of like buckled down and I felt like I didn't know enough about how paint worked. And so I started to look at other painters that didn't necessarily have my hand, which has always been very like kind of rough and awkward, not like smooth and delicate in any way. It's like carving with marble or blocks. So at the time I was like, all right, I'm gonna look at these other guys that are doing like lots of thin glazes, Odd Nerdrum, and then Rembrandt, who was like whatever, for a little while, kind of a big deal. And so I started to try and teach myself like how to work in glazes, using subject matter that, again, was still close to me, portraits of my dad. And then at the same time, I started to get kind of interested in this idea of memory in painting. And I started to use old family photographs as source material because I was attracted to the haziness of those images. And the way that kind of correlated with the idea of how memory fades over time. I would also kind of break the edges of these panels like after I would paint. So there was like some destruction that occurred. So with this work, I was able to get into grad school in Indiana. And that was like, I was like so stoked when I got there. And I had so many problems. And I was trying to think about what they all were and memorize them before the lecture. And I was like, I'm just going to write these down and read them. And then I thought, no, we're looking at pictures today, so I'll just make a drawing with letters. And so these are what I can recall, the major problems that I had in grad school: composition, light, shadow, formal issues, abstraction, subject matter, color. And then this one was a really big one, was overworking effects, which probably was tied to things I had going for me, which was that I love paint and I work hard. So these two things, without like some thought in the middle, it kind of equaled out to this overworking of things. And I seem to have misplaced all of the images of my paintings from my first year of grad school. So, sorry, there's none of those. But between my first and second year, I did get to go to Florence for study abroad with Barry Gell, who was my teacher and mentor while I was there. I mean, I had other teachers as well, but I had a special relationship with him. And he really held my hand and took me through Florence, through the painting there and in Italy. And seeing these paintings, there was like a slow dawning in my head, I think, subconsciously, that helped me think about some of those former issues, especially the Pontormo helped me really think about the way that negative and positive shapes work together. And how kind of a rhythm can be created through a composition. And then Tintoretto was like, man, those paintings just floored me. Like I just didn't know that paintings like that existed. And especially with him, like I think that I started to get a dawning of like how figure ground or push and pull can work in a painting, and how you can look at an image abstractly, or how you can look at the world and break it up into like a formal language of shapes or light and dark. So my computer skills are not very good, but I did for this lecture a while ago make this dorky little like breakdown. Here's a Tintoretto, and then there's the big dark shapes and this big light shape. And then there's these kind of middle gray shapes as well. And they start to take on the role of figures. So again, while I was thinking about this lecture, I was like, I was like doing more than just going to art museums when I was in Italy. We were working, but I was also like introduced to Italian cinema for the first time, and specifically Italian horror movies. I don't know why, but it became a real thing. In our apartment, we watched a lot of Dario Argento's movies. And his movies always have this like mood to them from the light. And Suspiria is one, and I can't remember whether I saw it there or I watched it when I got back, but it has got this incredible color mood like all the way throughout. And the color plays such an important role in the composition of the whole film. And all of that started to coalesce like sometime in my third semester in grad school, kind of subconsciously. I think it wasn't happening like in the front of my mind. It was back here somewhere. And I know this because I had this weird dream one night of like, I was like looking into this view of like a roller rink, and there were all these like dark shapes in the foreground, and then the middle ground had this light that came through it. And there was somebody on like a roller skate. And then the background was like more people, but they were kind of in this mid-tone. And I woke up from that dream and I like ran up to my studio and I made a painting of it. And I was like, oh, I kind of get it. I kind of get it. I don't have a picture of that painting. I really wish I did, but I have no idea where it is. So I started to experiment with like different colored lights in my studio. And when I'm experimenting with things, I tend to start with myself. And so I did a series of self-portraits where I was setting up like warm and cool lights to help me like think about color moods in the painting more. My thesis work then turned into these kind of much larger paintings, which I think is one of the things that helped solve the overworking problem, because they were so big. It's like I could come in, I could work, and I was working with like a really soupy medium, very gesturally. And it's like I had enough energy to crawl across this whole thing, and then I kind of had to stop and wait and then come back the next day to work. So I couldn't really get in there and like overwork any particular area. I was also setting up these little dioramas in my studio and casting different colored lights on them. This particular one is based on a memory of like wandering in the woods with my friends. And originally the paintings were very tight, like I was trying to render this dorky little diorama in front of me that was constructed with like styrofoam and G.I. Joe action figures. And Barry came into my studio one day and he said, can I do something? And I said, sure. And I thought he was going to like paint on my painting. And he walked right past the painting and went over to the diorama and just went, and just like knocked the whole thing over and totally destroyed it. And then he was like, paint that. And then he left. And I did. And the painting got a lot better. And I was like, that is so cool. Like I can really change things in my paintings, you know? That painting, that one is, I think, 9 feet by 6 feet. And then this is another one from that time that's 4 foot by 5 foot, I think. I really don't remember the titles either. After graduate school, my studio shrank considerably, and that meant that my paintings had to shrink considerably. And I started to get interested in the landscape because I was doing a lot of commuting between Bloomington and Indianapolis to teach. And so I started pulling over on the side of the road and making these little drawings of the landscape. And I would bring those drawings back to my studio and then start to make these paintings. I started to have like an overworking problem with these as well because they were so small. And the way that I kind of solved that problem with this series of work was just by cutting pieces of paper and Yupo out, and when the painting got muddy, just sticking it right in and then kind of continuing to work. So that body of work kind of transitioned into this next series, which was like I started, and I don't remember totally why I decided to do this, but I wanted to push as much of the subject matter out as I could. And this is the only acrylic painting I've ever done in my life. And it's only acrylic. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So then I kept working and working, and I was trying to use just the painting as the source. And developing the painting through it is the only option. Trying to reopen it and then like close it back down or bring it to some sort of resolution. They got larger and larger. This is the last one that I did in that series. And I think it was called Discovery. And it's 8 foot by 6 foot. So I was also starting to kind of like experiment with different materials in the painting as well. At this time, my partner and I moved to Minneapolis. And this is a picture of me in Minnesota on a beautiful December day. When I was When I first got there, I did not have a job and I did not have any money. I could not buy paint. I couldn't buy ramen noodles. So I had no way really of working except for digitally. Like I said earlier, I'm not very good with computers, but somebody showed me Photoshop and I kind of tried to break it, I think. Like I would bring pictures into it and I just was like, what's this do? What's that do? What's this do? And so these things started to turn into like really, really layered kind of digital collages. Eventually, I was able to get a job at a art supply store, which that is a great place to have a job because you usually get a discount. There will be free things, and everybody there is an artist too, and you get a community. So I highly recommend that if you are looking for that kind of job. So once I could afford paint again, I decided I'd try to bring some of these digital things into the physical realm by making paintings of them. And I was curious to see what would translate or how things would translate when I tried to bring something that was so clean and non-real into like a physical, real space. This is one of the last ones in that series, and it's 6 foot by 6 foot, and it's called Jaws. This painting, like I threw everything I had at it. I think I started with house paint and then started to build up with acrylic, airbrush, spray paint, opaque oil paint. I taped off that whole ribbon area and like kind of meticulously created this, transition in colors over the course of like a week and really tortured myself with that whole scenario. So like right around this time, 2011, my mother got sick with cancer and died pretty quickly, which was just horrible. I was in Minnesota and I could not get back very frequently. Our relationship was good, but contentious. And so this is the only painting that I have ever done for her, which I did in undergrad. And when I went back to Minneapolis, it had elicited a response in me when I came back and looked at my work that I had done previously. That was like, I didn't know why I was making those paintings. Like they didn't feel like they meant anything to me. They looked like paintings, but they didn't feel like they belonged to me. And I decided that I wanted them to belong to me. So I was like, I need to paint things that are closer. And so the closest thing that I could think of, because I was not at home, was myself. So I started making self-portraits. And then when I would go home, I would make a painting of my dad if I had an opportunity to do so. And at this time, I also started to use the palette knife a lot more frequently to not just mix the paint, but also to apply it directly to the surface. And this suddenly it was a little bit like the first time that I started painting, where I felt like I'd found a tool that really made sense with the way that I thought. Because I was able to mix things and then put colors down in a way that worked better with a rhythm that I liked. When I was working with a brush, like part of the problem of overworking it was that I would just keep brushing when there was no paint, instead of just letting the mark sit. So this was kind of like a big revelation. At the same time, because like bodies and work or ideas kind of tend to overlap for me, where I'm exploring different avenues in the studio of things. I was also making these self-portraits that were like kind of deconstructed heads, you know, whereas this was pretty direct, like straightforward painting. These took on like a little bit more like of an indirect process where I would put the paint down, I would pull it off, scrape it, I would mask areas, I would use blue tape to block out areas, paint over it, pull that off, and then repaint things, resulting in like kind of a jumbled collection of shapes and forms. And this, I can't remember what I called this, but I do remember calling the entire series of paintings the Mr. Potato Head paintings. So then I was able to move back to Kansas. I was offered a sabbatical replacement at my alma mater at the University of Kansas. And I really had desperately wanted to go back to spend time with my father over here. Because I'm only child and he is the like only direct family that I have left. So, you know, he was in his 70s then, and he gets along fine, you know, but I just, you know, I wanted to be there and I wanted to spend time with him. So I came back and I decided to make some paintings of him. So initially I was having him come to my studio and I was, you know, so this is kind of where things started. This is a painting that I did with my grandmother when I was in undergrad. After she had a series of relatively severe strokes that left her unable to really take care of herself. And she was in a nursing facility, and my mother and stepfather and I would go and get her and bring her to my mother's house for dinner on the weekends. And I really wanted to make a painting of her because I loved her and I thought that she was still beautiful. But I put it up here because I thought that there was, you know, I wasn't thinking about this painting when I made this painting, you know, or this subject matter when I made this subject matter. And I just think it's interesting how it carries through. And even some of like the color decisions where the mark making carries over as well. So this is a little painting. It's 9 by 12 inches that came after that last one. This one, I call it Dad at 100 because I think I accidentally aged him by like 40 years. But this painting, like, I had him come and sit because I thought I had to do that. And he would sit and he's very bad. I know he's not watching because he can't manage the Facebook or any of that stuff. So, like he couldn't sit still. Like he's very poor at sitting still. And even when he thinks he's sitting still, he's like doing this move. He asked if he could bring a book one time. And I said, sure. And he had the book open. And every time he would turn a page, it was like his head would turn with. And so I was like, okay, that's cool. I don't want to, you know, I don't know if that's the thing I want to do. So I ended up taking a bunch of pictures of him. And then I would come in and I worked on this painting for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. And it was like a paint, and then I'd scrape, and then paint, and scrape. And I was really pissed the whole time. Like it never worked. And then one day I left the studio and I came back the next morning and it had finished itself. And like, obviously there were no like studio goblins that came out and worked on the painting, but it just, something changed in my mind, like about what I wanted in the painting and what I thought the portrait could be. And I think what happened was I decided that, yeah, I want there to be some semblance of likeness, but it's like, I want the paint to be present as well. Like I want people to be able to feel that material. So this opened up like a lot of, like another avenue in my head about portraiture. It's like, well, you know, if it's not just about a likeness, then maybe it can also be about a place. And My father has lived in the same house since 1980, like where I grew up. They got divorced in 88. My mom left. He stayed. Certain parts of the house have been somewhat neglected. Other parts of the house have been kind of very well maintained in a specific way, which is his way. One of those areas is the garden. So I made this large painting of him in that space. And then the garage went from being a garage to a motorcycle shop pretty quickly. He's always loved motorcycles since he was a kid. And I really love this space. I'm not mechanically inclined. Like, he has explained to me how a carburetor works. Maybe once a year he tries to explain it, and I'm like, I got it. And then an hour later he can be like, can you remember? And I said, no. So I was really, but I love the space. I love all the colors and shapes and the stuff, like this thing and this motorcycle and this weird, like, I don't know what that thing is. I'm blanking right now. It's got all these posters on the wall, like James Dean. I came back later because this space was like super empty and it didn't work in the painting. And so I thought, I'm going to paint this giant motorcycle engine, like right there. And as I was doing it, I was kind of thinking, he could take this apart, put it back together again. I cannot, but I can paint it. And so in that way, maybe we can have a relationship in that way. One of the things that was kind of bothering me at this time, was I felt like I was getting these vignettes, like these little view, even though these paintings, that last painting was, again, it was like 6 foot by 5 foot. I still felt like I wasn't getting enough of his space. Like, I wanted a wider view. And so with this painting, it's 2 canvases. Each one is 6 by 5 foot, I think. And I started with maybe the one on the left, I think, and then I just added this one and continued the space. And that like blew my mind. When I realized I could do that, it suddenly started to feel so much better. Like, I was actually getting the point of view that I wanted people to see when they looked into this space. It also allowed me to really get into some of these like weird little areas, like these funny little pathways. Because I love this macro view, but I also really, really love to get into these little weird sections and like kind of wander like a path through and see how I can like find my way in and out. So then I thought, well, the only way to go is bigger. And so I started adding more and more canvases. This painting started, I think, with this canvas on the right, which was just a view of the living room. I was really dissatisfied with that. So I liked this natural kind of blockage right here, which is a wall. And then it leads into the kitchen. And I have these 2 points of view. It's not conducive to set up I think, 15-foot painting in his house. He would just like walk through it, I think. So I was taking a lot of photographs. And when I made these 2 paintings, like kind of around the same time, so I had a lot of the images from the same point of view. This one I had to go back months later and try to find the spot. And I kind of had 2 choices. I was like, I can either get really neurotic and try to figure out exactly where I was standing and how this would shift, or I can take a bunch of pictures and I can try to solve the problem of joining this space to this space in the painting. And I locked myself out of the first option and went with the second. And I'm really glad I did, because it kind of reminded me, maybe for the first time, I realized that, I can kind of I can move things. This isn't, this is representative of a real place, but it's not reality. Painting isn't a reality. So I can move or manipulate things to make this world make sense. And it doesn't have to correspond directly to what's what's there. So then I made this larger painting in the shop. This one it's his favorite motorcycle. And he's been rebuilding it since I was 13, and it's still not finished. This painting, I thought I was going to have to get like really, because he's kind of the central part of the painting, and I thought I was going to have to get really worried about a lot of these parts. And then I passed over this like twice, and then I was like, oh, look at all these little bits. And started moving through here, and I was like, this is so much fun. Like really kind of looking at these spaces in here. And I had a lot of fun kind of with these images within the images. The next painting was, this is, I think, a family album. I've used that title like several times. But with this one, I was like really interested to see if how much bending and warping in the space I could kind of get away with. And so this is his living room space. I also, at this time, like kind of wanted to push my color a little bit more. And so I started to bring in some more transparent colors, things like quinacrinones and magentas, like the really more zippy than the normal kind of earth tones that I usually use. And so this was like really an uncomfortable painting for me. And at the same time, I was also like, in the other two paintings, I didn't really set things up. I was just kind of using what was there as he placed things there. This one I went through and I like put things in that I wanted to paint, so like I swapped out, and this is a painting, I just showed this painting earlier in the talk, actually. It's a landscape painting. This is the painting that I started with at the beginning of the talk, one of the very first ones I did. And then all this stuff along the bottom, I sort of finished the painting, and I thought that this little bit was kind of boring. And so I came in and added all these little images from the family album. And that part probably took like as much time to paint as the rest of the whole thing. So after these paintings, I had been in the studio for like a year and a half, making these really big, kind of cumbersome paintings that just were a lot. And so I was burned out and I didn't want to be really in there anymore. And so I started doing plein air landscape painting, which is not something that I had done since like grad school. And it felt like so good to just be able to go out and to make a painting, to do it kind of quickly, and just to respond to what was in front of me, just to like really push the paint around. And these are all from varying areas around Lawrence. They're all relatively small. It's 5 by 5 inches. I think this is 9 by 12 inches. This is oil on paper. It got, it needed another piece. In the woods, 11 by 14 inches. And then I called this one Windy because I decided to make it on a whim. I made it from the parking lot, one of the parking lots at the university. I was struck by these little houses like down the hill and the way they kind of related to this weird grain silo, and then the haze that occurred throughout the whole kind of thing. And the painting looks very different from the other ones because I wasn't able to use the palette knife in any way. It was so windy when I was set up. I was holding the easel and I was trying to balance my palette against the easel so it wouldn't fly away. And I had like a paper towel in my hand and I could jab my brush into a color in another color. And then I could stick it onto the surface and move it around a little bit and then get some more color. They have since built a football practice facility that completely obfuscates this view. So I'm glad I made that painting. Football team isn't any better. So then, rejuvenated, I went back into the studio And at this time, I was waiting for a studio at the university. And while I waited, my studio became the basement of my father's house. And so I was over there a lot. And I decided that I wanted to start painting of his kitchen space. And specifically, I was mostly interested in this view because I see it so frequently when I'm over there. And it is my father having his pizza lunch on Saturdays because I'll order pizza on Friday and I won't eat it all. And then he'll come over and take it out of my refrigerator and he'll eat it for lunch. So this was just like a very, very familiar space, a very familiar view. I started the painting and worked on it in the basement of his house. This painting had, like, it really talked back to me in a way that I was maybe unaccustomed to. Because again, I started with a whole bunch of photographs and then I would like run down into the basement and I would paint. And I'd be like, no, that's not right. And I'd come back up because I have to have something to look at. I would like take a bunch more pictures, but I would move things around, like, because, you know, there's like, it's just, this space is always very jumbled. Like there's lots of stuff, you know? And so I wanted to get that in the painting, and which required that I kind of manipulate some things because I was also thinking about what I wanted to paint and what I wanted in painting. So I would come back upstairs, I would move things around, take a bunch more pictures, and I'd run down and paint, and then come back upstairs, move things, and then go back, so on and so forth. So that especially happened for the central panel. And I was able to move into a studio at the university after I kind of finished this part. And so it didn't happen as much with the other two pieces. These are just some detail shots. Like this, I really want to paint this pizza, and this thing, that was really hard. So, and here it is installed. It's 5.5 feet by 20 feet. And the progression of it was kind of this panel to this one. And I really stalled out in between these two. Lost momentum, did a bunch of paintings. Came back, worked on this, added this section over here, worked on it a whole bunch, had a visit from a friend who said, you could just keep adding things. And he was right. And so then I added this section over here, but something kind of funny happened over here, whereas with these pieces, I was like painting and then coming back and changing things and then going back to the painting, changing things. I went in with an intention of how I wanted to set this up. And I spent probably 4 or 5 hours just like putting things together the way I wanted them in that painting, a little bit more directly. And that, I just say that because it comes into play a little bit later. Okay, so I also have I draw very, very frequently, draw every day. And I just make quick drawings from photographs that I take. I take a lot of pictures. I put them up on my studio wall. They're all very small, 9 by 12 inches. It really like informs my painting process as far as like composition, thinking about things. It could be anything, you know, it's my dad and me, and it's my cats and my foot. And then recently I installed them in this show on this kind of movable wall the same way that I would like in my studio. And I like the way that they become like a record of days, and then they kind of pile on top of each other like memories, and start to create a kind of narrative. You know, when my mom died, I inherited these family albums, and I was really attracted to a lot of the little photographs in there. Like their wedding album was one of them. I tried to make paintings just of the photographs, but that didn't feel right. There was something about that, just it seems too simple or something. So I started making these collages. I found these color packs of kind of limited limited color packs, like 5 tones or something. And I found that some of them like matched perfectly with the color quality and mood of these old photographs. And so I started using them as a way to make these collages. They started out very small. That last one was like 9 by 12 inches. This got, and then they started to get big. This one was like 30 by 40 inches, I think. And then they got, they start to get big, but they also start to get like really kind of layered. And there's something like, I feel like they're really weird. Like they're just like kind of awkward. And I like that. Like I like to kind of pile the paper because it seems like just like a kind of obtuse thing to do. And it, in my mind, the thing that I like about it, it's like a photograph gives you like an illusion of a real thing, but it's not. It's just this kind of flat illusion. And I feel like when I bring these things into the collages, like they lose that likeness, but they gain a physicality that I feel like makes them more real. And a lot of the times it's like I think about it's the difference kind of between CGI dinosaurs and then like Kermit the Frog. It's like you look at that CGI dinosaur and you're like, that's not a real, I don't feel it, You look at Kermit the Frog isn't going to stand up and walk around on his own, I hope. But like your brain knows it's a physical, real thing. And that's kind of the thing that I like about these. So then I decided, I wanted to kind of try and approach making some paintings that had to do with my mom. And I can't paint her directly, obviously. And so I started thinking about the objects that were hers as kind of stand-ins for her. And one of them is this family album that has been around forever that I was sourcing way back at the beginning when I first started painting. This is family album, I think 48 by 48 inches. So then I decided I kind of wanted to expand this, and I started building these large installation things in my dad's house. And he is the most willing participant in all of my ridiculous ideas. And so I would come over in the evening and set up these little spaces with these photographs and objects that kind of belong to her, like her ashtray. And there's these old pictures of her. This Afghan that shows up a lot is something that I think that she made. And so I really think of it as her, or I think of it as her spirit. And so it moves through these paintings pretty regularly. So these setups all kind of went into this painting, which is titled Family Portrait, I think. And it's 6 foot by 15. And then these are some detailed shots. And I really loved getting into like these, where these photographs all kind of overlap each other and the edges start to get real weird, and just trying to find information in there and then trying to decide what to let go is really a game that I love to play. This painting's solitaire at 4 a.m. It's 48 by 48 inches. And she loved to play solitaire, and she loved to smoke cigarettes. And she would wake up at 4 a.m. every day, and she would smoke cigarettes, and she would play solitaire for as long as I knew her. And these cards were so like used that there were no numbers or letters on them anymore. And I don't know how she played with them. These, I had to go buy a fresh deck of cards because At her funeral, one of the things that my stepfather did was put her deck of cards into the casket with her. So that is kind of like the most recent, I think, completed body of work. I'm not sure. I kind of started to, with this painting, which it came kind of right on the heels of that last one, I was starting to think about my role in this because I have kind of documented him, and then I'm thinking about trying to document her. And I'm wondering a little bit where I reside in this situation. And I don't, usually put myself in these paintings. Like I do a lot of self-portraits on the side, but like I don't usually put myself into this space. And so with this painting, it was, I think, kind of a begin foray into that. And I decided to take a kind of first person perspective. And so my father is here with a past painting that I've done of him and a large image of my mother. And he has, in the last few years, started drawing and painting as well. And so he's got a little studio set up in his living room space. And, I've given him like that big blue Picasso book to look at. And it's like, I think Sargent watercolor books. He loves Sargent. And I showed him this painting, and this is like usually like kind of a test. Like I'll send him an image of something when I think it's near completion, and then he'll respond back. And usually whatever he responds back with is like the title of the painting because he's way better at it than I am. And so he just wrote back, "An old master and his young apprentice." And I was like, perfect. Absolutely perfect. So then these last few paintings are the newest things that I did right before I came here this summer. Again, I've been going to his house and doing kind of these setups. They're not quite as elaborate anymore, but I'm still using some of the stand-ins, like for my mother, like the Afghan. And then I've started to include myself in the images as well. This painting is 7 foot by, I think, 5.5 feet or something like that. And it's titled "A Bridegroom and Pallbearer." And I'm dressed in the suit that I wore to my mother's funeral. And he's dressed in the suit that he wore to their wedding. He still had it. And then this painting is 6, 7, I think it's the same size, 7 foot by 5 feet or something. And it's titled Green Gardens. This one I set up at my house, actually, to have like kind of a very different color mood. And when he comes over, he is really excited to sit in this yellow chair that I have that my cats have destroyed. But it's really one of his favorite places. So, and that's it. I think that's the end. Hi.
So I have a question about your multi-panel pieces.
Yeah.
When you know that you're going to do multiples, how do you address some of the, like, do you do a full underdrawing?
Oh, it really varies because I don't always know that I'm going to do a multi-panel painting. Like, I think if I knew that, I don't know if I would actually start it because I get very excited and I just start and then I realize how much work that's going to be. And then I'm like, oh, I've already started the roller coaster. But I think in general, when I start those big paintings, I start with very thin paint and they're super like abstract, and I just block out like really big shapes and try to block in like light and dark. And then if I go to add a second panel, I'll like push them together, like on the floor, like on cinder blocks against the wall. And then I'll just kind of work right over into that one And then I'll separate them and I'll work on one, kind of bring it up a little bit and then set it back and then bring up the other one, work it up a little bit. And there's a lot of like putting them together at the end of the day to just see how that middle piece meets. And then of course, the other parts as well.
I have a question that's kind of about the same stuff. Like when you're doing those interior paintings, do you work in the space or like from photographs?
It's from photographs. It's all from photographs.
So you talked about how your collage is sometimes read as more of a real photograph than the actual photograph. Do
Yeah.
you feel that after you painted all of the photographs into the larger paintings, that's more of a working database of the memories for you, or do you still feel that the photo is necessary? Like, which is more real to you at this point?
Between the photo and the painting?
The painting of the photos is like
The painting.
memories.
Yeah. The painting is for sure. And they, I don't know why, but it's like, sometimes I'll paint directly from a single photograph, but not usually those older ones like that. And there's something about having them in that space that makes it okay and makes it feel like more real. But yeah, the painting always feels more real than the photograph because of the tactility, I think.
We have a Zoom question. Mike Smith asks, what kind of paint do you use to paint on paper for your collage?
It's not paint. The collage is paper. So, and it's really cheap stuff that I buy at like Michael's, like really cheap. The process is the same as like when I paint, like, cause I mix colors as I go, right? And then when I collage, it's kind of the same thing. I've got this pile of paper. And then I have an X-Acto knife and I just like cut. And I'm not trying to fit a shape perfectly in. I'm thinking more about how what I'm going to put down is going to affect the edge of the thing that I'm putting it on top of.
One picture of an acrylic abstract. You said that's the only acrylic paint picture you use.
Yeah.
Why do you not like, what is your opinion of acrylic paint?
It's great for other people. Like, it's not good for me. Like, I've never been able to use it because it dries too quickly and it doesn't like taste right in my mouth or something. Like, it just doesn't have the right. I've tried so many times. I come back, I think I really should do this. Like, and, but it's just never felt right.
I misunderstood when you were showing the early process where you
I think it was really valuable to do, and it was really good for me because it forced me to slow down my process and think about how I was layering things, because when I was in undergrad, and I was, painting really thickly and scraping things away, there wasn't like as much thought about what I was doing. It was just a lot of like this, and so that experience was like really forced me to think like, okay, how do these things build on top of one another? How do drawing times work? And then how do these colors interact and kind of build on top of one another? And when I got to grad school, the paintings in my first year, I tried to keep doing that, and it just didn't. I was like, this just isn't right. Hello.
I was really interested in looking at your visual art and how it kind of went around. And do you see yourself going back to that at some point, or do you even see some of that visual work kind of reappearing in some of your more recent pieces or passes?
I don't really see myself going back to that because regardless of the medium that I was working in, it was still this idea about, it was still like kind of collage and layering things. which like runs through like my painting and the collage as well. And I don't see myself going back to the digital thing because the painting and the physical collage fill that void, you know, right now. And it wasn't, I mean, it was fun to do at the time, but it's like the acrylic paint, like it's just not tactile enough. And I think I know myself more now to know that like, this is like, I need this, you know, but it was super beneficial to do it.
The Holocaust process similar to facets in collage, and also what kind of glue do you use?
With the collage, it's like I'm cutting a piece of paper, putting it down, and then when I work with the knife, it's like I mix a color and I put it down in the same way. And I'm thinking about the opacity of it and the way that that mark is going to sit on top of or make an edge with the forms around it. So I think they're really similar in that. And then I guess also with the color too, because mixing with the knife keeps things cleaner than, for me at least, than mixing with the brush. And then the glue that I use, probably shouldn't use it, but I just use Mod Podge. But you could use, if you wanted to buy like some more expensive stuff that is probably more archival, you could get golden matte medium.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.